The crunch of metal wasn't just my workstation breaking, it was the sound of 15 years of burden snapping. As orange juice flooded the $8,000 machine, I remained silent. My brother just laughed, chewing the steak I bought. "So what?" he scoffed. "It's just a computer." He didn't know that the moment the screen went black, he hadn't just destroyed hardware, he had activated a cold, calculated purge that would cost him everything. My name is Lacey Hawkwell, and for the last 15 years, I have been the structural integrity of a house that was determined to collapse on itself. I am 34 years old, a lead systems architect for Stratum Systems, and up until 10 minutes ago, I was the dutiful daughter who drove 45 minutes every Sunday to eat dry roast beef and pretend that my family was not a financial sinkhole that I had been filling with concrete and cash since the day I graduated college. The dining room of my parents' house always smelled of old potpourri and whatever grease my mother was cooking with, a scent that clung to my blazer long after I left. Tonight, it was cheap oil and overcooked steak. I sat at the end of the mahogany table, a piece of furniture I had paid to have refinished 2 years ago. With my mobile workstation set up on a placemat, this was not a standard laptop. It was a custom-built rig with an open chassis for better cooling. Carrying a modified graphics processing unit and 64 gigabytes of RAM, it was a machine built for war, or at least, the digital equivalent of it. On the screen, lines of code cascaded in a beautiful, complex rhythm. I was in the final stages of compiling the core algorithm for Project Ether. Ether was not just software. It was a localized artificial intelligence designed to manage energy grids for megacities, optimizing power distribution in real time to prevent blackouts during heat waves. Stratum Systems had been bidding for the New York contract for 6 months. This weekend was the deadline. The data on my screen represented thousands of hours of labor and a potential contract worth $2 billion. "Lacey, put that thing away," my father grunted, stabbing a fork into a potato. "It is Sunday. We are eating." "I can't, Dad," I said, not looking up, my fingers flying across the mechanical keys. "The compile is at 92%. I just need to monitor the heat exchange until it hits the server upload. It will take 10 minutes. "Always working," my mother sighed, spooning more gravy onto Caleb's plate. "Unlike your brother, who knows how to appreciate family time." I paused, my fingers hovering over the keys. I looked across the table at Caleb. My older brother was 38 years old, wearing a faded sports jersey that stretched tight over his stomach. He was currently unemployed, having quit his last sales job because the manager did not respect his vision. He was chewing with his mouth open, a piece of steak dangling from his lip, the steak that I had paid for, the groceries in the fridge, the electricity powering the lights, the heating that kept the house warm against the Chicago chill. I paid for all of it. "Yeah, Lace, relax," Caleb said, spraying a few crumbs of breading onto the tablecloth. "You are making everyone nervous with that clicking noise. It is just a computer." I bit my tongue. I had learned to bite my tongue so often that I was surprised I still had one. I returned my focus to the screen. 94%. The localized data was still caching. If I lost the connection now, the heuristic learning model would corrupt, and I would lose 3 weeks of unique generation data that had not yet synced to the cloud due to the file size. Then there was Toby. Caleb's 5-year-old son was a blur of kinetic energy. He was a sweet boy, but disciplined like a feral cat. He was running laps around the dining table, screaming the siren noise of a fire truck. In his hand, he clutched a heavy, die-cast metal monster truck. It was a solid pound of zinc and plastic. "Vroom! Crash!" Toby yelled, banking hard around the corner of the table near my elbow. I flinched, instinctively shielding the exposed side of my workstation where the cooling vents were open. "Toby, please be careful," I said, my voice tight. "Mom, can you tell him to stop running in the dining room? This equipment is delicate." My mother waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, stop it. Lacey, he is just playing. You are so uptight. Let the boy be a boy. This house is a place to relax, not a corporate office. It is not about being uptight, I tried to explain, my eyes darting between the climbing percentage bar and the running child. This is dangerous. For him and the machine. He is fine, Caleb mumbled around a mouthful of mashed potatoes. Leave him alone. I exhaled slowly, trying to regulate my heart rate. 96%. Almost there. Just a few more minutes and the upload would trigger, securing the data on the Stratum secure servers in detailed, redundant backups. Toby came around for another lap. He was moving faster this time, fueled by the sugar in the orange juice he had been chugging. He rounded the corner by the buffet table, but his socked foot lost traction on the polished hardwood floor. It happened in a sequence that felt agonizingly slow, yet impossible to stop. Toby flailed, his left hand, holding a full glass of orange juice, swung outward seeking balance, his right hand, gripping the heavy die-cast metal truck. Jerked forward, he collided with the table leg. The impact sent a tremor through the wood. The glass of orange juice flew from his hand, creating a perfect amber arc through the air. In the same motion, the heavy metal truck launched from his grip like a projectile. No! The word barely left my throat. The orange juice landed first. It did not just spill. It inundated. The acidic, sticky liquid poured directly into the open chassis of my workstation, flooding the motherboard and the high-speed cooling fans. Then came the truck. The heavy metal toy slammed down with the force of a hammer directly onto the center of the keyboard and the lower section of the screen. Crack! The sound was sickening. It was the sound of expensive polarized glass shattering and precision-engineered plastic snapping. Zap! A literal sound of electrical arcing followed instantly. A distinct pop echoed in the silent room, followed immediately by the acrid chemical stench of frying capacitors and burning silicon. The screen flickered violently, green, then purple, then a static gray. The progress bar, which had been at 98%, vanished. The fans whirred into a death rattle, spraying droplets of orange juice out of the vents before grinding to a halt. Smoke, thin, gray wisps of smoke curled up from beneath the keys. The room went dead silent. The data, the local cache, the 3 weeks of unsupervised learning models that Ether had generated, it was gone. The localized drive had just been shorted out before the upload handshake could complete. I sat frozen, my hands hovering over the ruin of my work. The orange juice dripped from the edge of the desk onto my pants. Toby, realizing he had fallen, began to wail. It was that high-pitched, ear-splitting scream of a child who knows they have done something wrong and wants to preempt the punishment with tears. "Oh, my poor baby!" My mother shot out of her chair faster than I had seen her move in years. She scooped Toby up, checking his elbows. "Are you hurt? Did you hit your head?" "He's crying," Caleb shouted, standing up and throwing his napkin on the table. He glared at me. "Look what you did! You left that damn wire trap in his way." I did not move. I stared at the black screen. $8,000 of hardware was dead, but the hardware was replaceable. The code, the unique iterations of the AI that lived only on that local drive, was not. The backup was weeks old. The deadline was tomorrow. I started to speak, but my voice was a dry rasp. The project. Caleb walked over to Toby, who was burying his face in Grandma's shoulder. Sobbing theatrically, Caleb checked the boy, then turned to look at the smoking computer. He let out a scoff that sounded like a bark. "Jesus, Lacey, look at this mess," Caleb said, gesturing to the puddle of juice. "You got juice all over the floor. Mom just waxed this." I slowly lifted my head. The shock was fading, replaced by a cold, numbing sensation that started in my fingertips and spread to my chest. "He destroyed it," I whispered. "Caleb, the data is gone. The hardware is fried." Caleb rolled his eyes. He actually rolled his eyes. He picked up his fork again and pointed it at me. "So what if your project is worth billions?" he shouted, his voice booming in the small dining room. "It is just a computer. Look at Toby. He is scared half to death. You care more about that stupid machine than your own nephew." I looked at my father. Surely, the man who prided himself on discipline, the man whose mortgage I paid every month, would understand the magnitude of this loss. "Lacey," my father said, his voice stern, "stop making a scene. It is an accident. The boy slipped. You should not have had that thing at the dinner table. It is rude." "Rude?" I repeated the word, tasting the absurdity of it. "Dad, this is my career. This is the Stratum contract. This is everything." "Just buy a new one," my mother snapped, rocking Toby back and forth. "You make enough money. Stop acting like it is the end of the world. You are upsetting everyone. Look, the roast beef is getting cold." "Buy a new one," I echoed. That was the moment. That was the fracture point. It was not the sound of the glass breaking. It was the sound of my mother's voice reducing my life's work to a toy that could be replaced at a convenience store. I looked around the room. I saw the wallpaper I had paid for, the chandelier I had bought, the food they were eating, the clothes on Caleb's back. I realized with a sudden, crystal clarity that I was not a person to them. I was not a daughter, and I was not a sister. I was a utility. I was an ATM that breathed. I was a resource they mined when they needed comfort or cash. But the moment I became inconvenient, the moment I had needs or suffered a loss, I was a nuisance. They respected the 5-year-old who threw a metal truck more than they respected the woman who kept a roof over their heads. I felt the anger rising, but it was not the hot, fiery rage I was used to suppressing. It was something else. It was cold. It was absolute. It was the clinical detachment of a surgeon looking at a gangrenous limb and realizing there is only one option left: amputation. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I reached for a napkin. I wiped the sticky orange juice from my hands, one finger at a time. The room was filled with the sound of Toby's sniffling and my father's fork scraping against his plate as he went back to eating. They thought it was over. They thought I would pout, clean up the mess, buy a new computer, and deposit the check for the mortgage next week, like a good little soldier. I stood up. I unplugged the power cord. I closed the lid of the ruined workstation. Juice squelched out of the hinges. I picked up the heavy, dripping machine and tucked it under my arm. The silence in the room stretched out, heavy and suffocating. My mother stopped rocking Toby. Caleb stopped chewing. They looked at me, perhaps sensing the shift in the atmospheric pressure of the room. The air felt thinner, sharper. "Where are you going?" my mother asked, her tone accusatory. "We have not had dessert." I looked at Caleb. I looked him dead in the eyes. I wanted to memorize his face in this moment. The arrogance, the entitlement, the slight grease stain on his chin. "You are right," I said. My voice was steady, void of any tremor. It was the voice I used in boardrooms when I was dismantling a competitor's flawed logic. "Kids do not owe me anything. Toby is a child. He does not know the value of labor or property." Caleb smirked, thinking he had won. "Exactly. Glad you finally got some perspective." "But you," I continued, my eyes boring into his, "you are not a child. You do owe me." "I don't owe you anything," Caleb scoffed. "You owe me for the steak in your mouth," I said calmly. "You owe me for the chair you are sitting on. You owe me for the roof that is keeping the rain off your head. And you just broke the tool I used to pay for all of it." "You are being dramatic," my father warned, pointing his knife at me. "Sit down, Lacey." "No," I said. I turned away from the table. I did not look at the mess on the floor. I did not look at my mother's shocked face. I walked toward the stairs. "Lacey?" my mother called out, her voice shrill. "If you walk away now, you are ruining this family dinner." I did not answer. I had a bag to pack. And after that, I had a life to audit. The fracture was complete. The structure had failed. It was time to clear the rubble. The stairs felt steeper than I remembered. Or perhaps it was just the sudden weight of the realization that I was carrying more than just a ruined computer. My footsteps were heavy on the plush carpet. a beige wool blend that I had selected from a catalog 3 years ago because my mother complained the old hardwood was too cold for her ankles. I had paid $4,000 for the installation. Every step was a reminder of a transaction, a receipt, a line item in a budget that I had foolishly labeled family instead of charity. I entered the room I still called my bedroom. Though it had long since ceased to be a sanctuary, it was a guest room now, filled with the overflow of my parents' hoarding tendencies, boxes of holiday decorations, Caleb's old trophies from high school, stacks of magazines my mother swore she would read one day. I did not scream. I did not throw the dripping, sticky wreckage of my workstation against the wall, though the urge surged through my veins like adrenaline. Instead, I placed the machine on the bedspread. I moved with the efficiency of a crime scene cleaner. I pulled my overnight duffel bag from the closet. I opened it wide. My movements were mechanical. Toothbrush, charger, a spare blouse, my tablet. I did not pack sentiment. I did not look at the framed photo on the dresser of the four of us at Disney World. A trip I had financed entirely with my first bonus check. I left it there. It belonged to a different version of reality, a version where the people in the frame actually liked each other. I zipped the bag. The sound was sharp, like a zipper closing on a body bag. I turned to the door, bag in one hand, car keys in the other. My father was standing in the doorframe. He filled the space, his arms crossed over his chest, his face flushed with the kind of indignation that only a man who has never been held accountable can muster. "You are making a mistake, Lacey," he said, his voice low and rumbling. "You are blowing this out of proportion. You always do this. You get emotional, and you ruin the mood." I stopped. I looked at him. For the first time in my life, I did not see my father. I saw a beneficiary. "Move, Dad," I said. "I will not move," he countered, stepping forward. "You are going to go downstairs. You are going to apologize to your brother for scaring his son, and you are going to finish dinner. We are a family. We do not storm off because of a broken toy." A broken toy. My eyes traced the line of the doorframe he was leaning against. I remembered the contractor I had hired to widen these doors when my father had his hip surgery. I remembered the check I wrote for $6,000 to ensure the house was accessible for him. I looked at the shirt he was wearing. A Ralph Lauren polo I had bought him for Father's Day. I looked past him, down the hallway, to the bathroom where I had installed a walk-in tub that cost me $8,000 so he would not slip. "I paid for this door," I said. The words were quiet, devoid of heat. "I paid for the floor you are standing on. I paid for the roof that is keeping the rain off your head right now. That cost me $15,000. Dad, do you remember? 2 years ago, you said the leaks were ruining the attic." His face twitched. "That has nothing to do with this. That is money. This is family. You think money buys you the right to treat people like dirt?" "I think money buys me the right to not be treated like an ATM," I replied. "Now move, or I will calculate the interest on the loans I gave you for your truck and send you a bill by morning." He blinked. The threat was foreign to him. I had never threatened him before. I had always been the one who fixed things, not the one who broke them. He hesitated, and in that second of hesitation, his authority evaporated. He stepped aside. He did not say another word. He just looked at me with a mixture of confusion and fear, like a man watching a domesticated dog suddenly bare its teeth. I walked past him. I did not look back. The descent down the stairs was faster. I could hear them in the dining room, the clinking of silverware, the murmur of voices. They had actually gone back to eating. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the stomach, but it did not slow me down. It only hardened the resolve that was forming a protective shell around my heart. I reached the bottom of the stairs and turned toward the front door. The dining room was to my left. I could see them through the archway. My mother was cutting a piece of pie. Caleb was scrolling on his phone. Toby was playing with the metal truck on the floor, banging it against the baseboards. They looked up as I walked by. "Oh, look who decided to come down," Caleb said, not looking up from his screen. Done throwing your tantrum? I stopped. I set the bag down for a brief second to adjust my grip. I am leaving, I said. My mother froze with the pie server in mid-air. What? Don't be ridiculous. Lacey, it is pouring rain out there. Sit down. Have some pie. Daddy is sorry he yelled. Aren't you, Richard? My father had followed me down the stairs, lingering in the hallway behind me. He said nothing. I am not coming back, I said. I made sure to enunciate every syllable. Not tonight, not next Sunday, not for Thanksgiving. I am done. My mother's face crumpled, shifting instantly from matriarch to victim. It was a transformation I had seen 1,000 times, a weapon she wielded with expert precision. Tears welled up in her eyes on command. You are abandoning us? She wailed. Over a computer? A stupid machine? How can you be so petty? How can you be so ungrateful? After everything we have done for you. What have you done for me? I asked. It was a genuine question. Besides take? We raised you, she shrieked. We gave you life. And this is how you repay us? By walking out because your nephew made a little mistake? You have a heart of stone. Lacey, cold, hard stone. Caleb laughed. It was a dry, scratching sound. Let her go. Mom, she is just doing this for attention. She has nowhere else to go. Who else is going to put up with her? She is boring. She is obsessive. She will be back in 3 days, begging to buy us dinner just so someone will talk to her. He looked at me with a smirk that was entirely devoid of affection. Go ahead, Lace. Run along to your lonely apartment. We will be here when you get over yourself. I looked at him. I remembered the phone call 3 years ago. It was 2 a.m. Caleb was crying. He owed $12,000 to a bookie in South Chicago. He was terrified they were going to break his legs. I drove to the bank the next morning. I withdrew the cash. I drove to a parking lot behind a diner and handed an envelope to a man with a neck tattoo just so my brother could sleep at night. I never asked for the money back. I never told our parents. You are right, Caleb, I said. I am boring. I am just the person who pays for the silence. I picked up my bag. I opened the front door. The sound of the rain was a sudden roar, drowning out my mother's sobbing. The wind was cold, biting through my thin blouse, but it felt clean. It felt real. Lacey, my mother screamed. If you walk out that door, do not bother coming back. That is the plan, I whispered to myself. I stepped out and pulled the heavy oak door shut behind me. The latch clicked. It was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I walked to the detached garage. The automatic light flickered on as I entered, my car. A sleek, gray sedan that I kept in pristine condition sat there like a loyal beast waiting for its rider. I opened the trunk and placed the ruined workstation inside. Wrapping it in a towel I kept for emergencies, it was evidence now. I got into the driver's seat. The leather was cold. I pressed the start button. The engine purred to life, a low, steady hum that vibrated against my spine. I backed out of the garage, the rain hammering against the windshield, blurring the world into streaks of red taillights and yellow street lamps. I did not look at the house as I pulled onto the street. I kept my eyes forward. I merged onto the highway, heading toward downtown Chicago. The wipers slapped a frantic rhythm against the glass. Swish, thwack, swish, thwack. Inside the car, it was silent. I waited for the tears. I waited for the crushing wave of guilt that usually followed any confrontation with my family. I waited for the urge to turn around, to go back, to fix it, to apologize for things I had not done. It did not come. Instead, my mind began to clear. The fog of emotional obligation lifted, replaced by the crisp, geometric architecture of logic. I was a systems architect. When a node in a network is corrupted, you do not argue with it. You do not try to reason with it. You isolate it. You bypass it. You reroute resources to functional sectors. I reached for my phone on the dashboard mount. I tapped the speed dial for Stratum System Security. This is Hawkwell, I said the moment the line connected. My voice was steady, professional, stripped of all familial weakness. Authentication code Alpha 9 Zulu 4. I am declaring a Level 1 hardware compromise. The voice on the other end was immediate and alert. Copy that. Ms. Hawkwell, status of the drive? Physical unit is destroyed, I said, merging into the fast lane. Liquid damage and blunt force trauma. The local encryption keys might be compromised if the chipset is intact. I am initiating Protocol Ghost remotely, but I need a secure clean room ready when I arrive tomorrow morning. Tell the night team to prep a new chassis. I want the mirror server isolated from the public grid. Understood. We will have the lab ready at 0600 hours. Do you need a retrieval team? No, I said. I have the asset. I am securing it now. Hawkwell out. I hung up. I saw the exit for my apartment, but I did not take it. My apartment was too close to them. Caleb had a spare key. My parents knew the doorman. If I went there, they would be banging on my door by midnight. I drove past the exit. I continued into the heart of the city, where the skyscrapers pierced the low-hanging clouds like needles. I pulled into the circular driveway of the Langham. It was one of the most expensive hotels in the city. I handed the keys to the valet. "Welcome back, Ms. Hawkwell," the doorman said, recognizing me from the corporate events I had hosted there. "Staying with us tonight?" "Indefinitely," I said. I walked to the front desk. The marble floor reflected the lights of the chandeliers. The air smelled of white tea and expensive lilies. It did not smell of potpourri and stale grease. "I need a suite," I told the concierge. "Riverview, and I need the highest speed secure internet connection you have. Charge it to my personal black card." "Of course, Ms. Hawkwell. We have the Infinity Suite available." "I will take it." I took the key card. I rode the elevator to the penthouse level. When the doors opened, I stepped into a world of silence and glass. I walked to the window and looked down at the city. The cars were just tiny specks of light moving through the arteries of the streets. Somewhere out there, in the suburbs, my family was likely sitting in front of the television, complaining about me, confident that I would return to my role as their servant. They were wrong. I took out my phone again. I opened my banking app. I looked at the balance. Then I looked at the calendar. I did not cry. I did not mourn the loss of the Sunday dinners. I sat down at the glass desk in the corner of the suite. I opened the drawer and took out a notepad and a pen. I wrote down one word at the top of the page: audit. The fracture was behind me. Now, the restructuring would begin. I was not just a daughter anymore. I was a creditor, and it was time to collect. The automated doors of Stratum Systems headquarters hissed open at 5 a.m. on Monday. The lobby was cavernous and silent, bathed in the cool blue glow of the standby security lights. I walked across the polished granite floor, the clicking of my heels echoing like gunshots in a canyon. I was 3 hours early. The sun had not yet breached the horizon over Lake Michigan, but my internal clock was already running on high-alert adrenaline. I carried the carcass of my workstation in a waterproof bag. It felt lighter now, perhaps because the soul of the machine had already departed, or perhaps because I had shed the dead weight of my emotional attachments the night before. I went straight to the clean lab on the 12th floor. The air inside was scrubbed and pressurized, smelling faintly of ozone and antiseptic. David, the lead hardware technician, was already there, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He had been one of the few people I trusted to answer a call at midnight. He took the bag from me without a word. He placed the ruined chassis on the anti-static mat and began the autopsy. I stood behind the glass partition, arms crossed, watching him peel back the layers of my destroyed work. He removed the casing. The damage was visible even from where I stood. The motherboard was coated in a sticky, crystallized residue. The orange juice had cooked onto the circuits when the power surged. David worked for 20 minutes, testing connections with a multimeter. Finally, he straightened up and looked at me through the glass. He pressed the intercom button. "It is a total loss, Lacey." His voice came through the speaker, flat and clinically apologetic. The liquid shorted the primary bridge. It surged straight into the solid-state drive controller. The physical chips are fried. If you are looking for data recovery from this local hardware, you are looking at a forensic process that will take weeks, and even then, the success rate is near zero. I nodded. I had expected this. By 8 in the morning, the office began to fill. The buzz started as a murmur and quickly grew into a roar. The executive team from New York had landed. I could see them in the conference room down the hall. A Shark Tank of expensive suits and aggressive handshakes. They were here for the Ether demo. They were here to decide if Stratum Systems was worth a $2 billion contract with the Department of Energy. Word of my accident had spread. Bad news in a tech company travels faster than fiber optics. I walked to the break room to get black coffee, and the conversation stopped the moment I entered. Jason, a senior project manager who had been gunning for my position for 3 years, was leaning against the counter. He tried to mask his smirk with a look of faux concern. "Heard about the hardware failure. Lacey," he said, his voice dripping with insincere sympathy. "That is rough. I hope you have a recent backup on the cloud. Although, knowing the file sizes for Ether's learning models, the upload lag usually kills the integrity, right? It would be a shame if we had to tell New York we need an extension." He was enjoying this. He thought I was dead in the water. He thought I had come to work with nothing but a broken laptop and a handful of excuses. "Don't worry about it, Jason," I said, pouring my coffee without a tremor in my hand. "Focus on your own deliverables." I walked back to my office and locked the door. I sat down at my desk, which was equipped with a fresh standard-issue terminal. I cracked my knuckles. It was time to initiate Protocol Ghost. Jason and the others assumed I relied on standard consumer internet at my parents' house. They assumed I trusted the shaky Wi-Fi router my father refused to upgrade because he thought 5G caused health issues. They underestimated my paranoia. Years ago, I realized that relying on anything in that house was a strategic error. So, I had built a fail-safe. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small, black device, no larger than a pack of gum. It was a military-grade cellular modem with its own independent power source. I had hardwired it into the internal architecture of my ruined workstation months ago. It did not rely on the system's main power. It did not rely on the local Wi-Fi. Protocol Ghost was a hidden synchronization script. Every keystroke I made, every line of code I compiled, every heuristic adjustment I tweaked was compressed into micropackets and fired through an encrypted tunnel over a private cellular network to a secure, off-site server that I paid for personally. It bypassed the company VPN, bypassed the home internet, and bypassed the local drive entirely. I plugged the authentication key into my terminal. I opened the command line. The screen was a comforting void of black. I typed in the retrieval sequence. Initiate handshake. The cursor blinked. 1 second, 2 seconds. Connection. Established. I exhaled. The ghost was there. The shadow of my work, the spirit of the machine, was alive in the cloud. I began the download. The progress bar appeared on the screen. It was not just retrieving files. It was reconstructing the neural pathways of the AI. 30%. My phone rang. It was the CEO's secretary. "The board is ready, Ms. Hawkwell. They are expecting the demonstration in 1 hour." "I will be there," I said. 45%. I watched the data stream. It was massive. The bandwidth was being pushed to its absolute limit. I thought about the night before at the hotel. I had not slept. After I checked in, I had logged into this same secure server from my laptop. I had been fueled by a cold, crystalline rage. I had looked at the code for Project Ether, and I saw the hesitation in it. I saw the safety protocols I had written to make the AI cautious, to make it palatable for the bureaucrats. But last night, I stripped those safety rails away. I stopped coding for safety and started coding for efficiency. I poured my anger into the algorithm. I taught Ether to be ruthless. I taught it that resources were finite and that waste was the enemy. I optimized the energy distribution models with a calm ferocity. If a node was inefficient, Ether was now programmed to cut it off instantly to save the grid, just like I had cut off my family. 78%. I checked my watch. 40 minutes until showtime. The data was reintegrating, but the compilation would be tight. Jason walked past my glass wall. He glanced in, saw the progress bar, and frowned. He looked confused. He probably thought I was downloading a resignation letter template. 92%. The door to my office opened without a knock. It was Marcus, the chief operations officer. He looked pale. "Lacey, be honest with me," he said, closing the door behind him. "Do we have a product? The New York team is hearing rumors that the prototype was destroyed. If we walk into that room empty-handed, our stock price is going to plummet by noon." "Marcus," I said, not looking away from the screen. "Do you trust me?" "I trust hardware," he said nervously, "and I hear your hardware is in a body bag." "The hardware is a shell," I said. "The mind is intact." 98%. The bar hung there for a terrifying 5 seconds. The room felt suddenly hot. If the checksum failed, if even one packet of data had been lost in the transmission during the accident, the entire AI model would collapse into gibberish. 99%. Download complete. Integrity verified. I stood up. I grabbed my tablet. I smoothed the lapels of my blazer. I looked at Marcus. "Let's go make $2 billion, I said. We walked into the boardroom. The atmosphere was heavy, thick with the scent of expensive cologne and skepticism. 12 men and women sat around the long oak table. At the head sat the director of urban energy for New York. He looked bored. He looked like a man who had already decided to say no. "Ms. Hawkwell," the director said, checking his watch. "We heard there were technical difficulties. We encountered a stress test on our physical infrastructure," I said, connecting my tablet to the main display. My voice was calm, commanding. I did not apologize. I did not explain. It provided us with an excellent opportunity to demonstrate the resilience of the ether system. I tapped the screen. The lights in the boardroom dimmed. The main projector flared to life. "Gentlemen, ladies," I began, "you are looking for an energy management system. You want something that manages the grid. That is yesterday's technology. Stratum Systems has not built a manager. We have built a survivor." I launched the simulation. This was the new code. This was the code I had forged in the fires of my own betrayal. On the screen, a simulation of New York City's power grid appeared. It was a complex web of glowing lines. I introduced a variable, a massive, catastrophic heat wave combined with a partial infrastructure failure in Queens. In the old version, the AI would have tried to balance the load gently, dimming lights, asking for voluntary reductions. The new ether did not ask. On the screen, the AI reacted instantly. It identified the weak nodes, the energy leaks, the inefficient substations, and it severed them. It rerouted power with a surgical precision that was almost frightening. It sacrificed the non-essential to save the vital. Hospitals, emergency services, and transport hubs remained glowing bright green, while empty office buildings and decorative lighting were plunged into darkness to preserve the core. The efficiency rating on the screen skyrocketed. 99.9% uptime for critical services. The room was silent. I zoomed in on the data. "Ether does not hesitate," I said, looking directly at the director. "It analyzes value. It determines what is essential and what is a drain on the system. It protects the asset by eliminating the waste. It is not emotional. It is effective." I watched the director's face change. The boredom vanished. He leaned forward. He was looking at the screen like he was looking at the future. "This reaction time," one of the engineers whispered. "It is precognitive. How is it predicting the load failure before it happens?" "Because it understands the pattern of failure," I said. "It knows that weakness, if left unchecked, spreads, so it stops it at the source." The presentation lasted 40 minutes. It was flawless. I answered every question before they finished asking it. I dismantled their doubts with the same efficiency ether dismantled power surges. When the lights came back on, The director stood up. He did not look at Marcus. He looked at me. "That is the most aggressive defense protocol I have ever seen," he said. "It is exactly what we need." He turned to his legal counsel. "Draw up the papers. We are signing today." The room erupted. Handshakes. Applause. Marcus looked like he was going to faint from relief. Jason, standing in the back corner, looked like he had swallowed a lemon. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the CEO's office. The champagne was already popped. "Lacey, that was extraordinary," the CEO said, beaming. "You saved the company. The board is ecstatic. We are creating a new position for you, Regional Chief Technology Officer. You will oversee the entire implementation for the East Coast." He slid a folder across the desk. "And of course, the performance bonus, we are doubling it." I opened the folder. The check inside was for an amount that would buy my parents' house 3 times over. It was a number that meant absolute, unshakable freedom. "Thank you," I said, closing the folder. "You must have a great support system at home," the CEO said, raising his glass. "To be able to focus like that." I smiled. It was a genuine smile, but it did not reach my eyes. "No," I said. "I did this alone." I walked out of the office. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. It was my city now. I had the power. I had the control. And for the first time in my life, I did not owe a single cent of my success to anyone but myself. Protocol Ghost was a success. The data was safe, the user was logged in, and the firewall was impenetrable. The Infinity Suite was quiet, save for the hum of the city 30 floors below. I sat at the expansive glass desk, a bottle of sparkling water and a bowl of fresh berries beside me. Stratum Systems had issued me a new laptop, a sleek, top-of-the-line model that smelled of factory plastic and potential. But tonight, I was not coding AI algorithms. I was conducting an autopsy on my own finances. I opened a blank spreadsheet. I titled it simply, Hawkwell Liquidation. For years, I had avoided looking at the aggregate numbers. I paid bills as they came in, auto drafts, quick transfers, Venmo requests labeled emergency. I treated these expenses like a tax on my existence, the cost of doing business as a daughter and a sister. But now, with the clarity of distance and the cold resolve of my new title, I was ready to see the sum total of my stupidity. I logged into my primary bank account. I set the filter range to 10 years. I began to export the data. The scroll bar on the right side of the screen shrank to a tiny sliver. The list was endless. Row 1. A TT family plan. 4 lines. $320. Row 2. State Farm Insurance. Richard Hawkwell Truck. $150. Row 3. Visa Signature. Authorized User. Martha Hawkwell. Target. $412. Row 4. Venmo. Caleb Hawkwell. Memo. Car trouble. $500. I started categorizing. Color coding. Red for recurring bills. Orange for loans never repaid. Yellow for pure, unadulterated frivolity. The screen began to look like a bloody battlefield. I scrolled back to 2022. There was a charge for $8,000. I remembered that one. It was for Toby's braces. Caleb had called me, crying, saying the insurance wouldn't cover the specific ceramic brackets his wife wanted because they were cosmetic. I had wired the money the same day. I scrolled to 2024, a transfer of $4,000. Dad's dental implants. I scrolled to last month. A charge of $90 for Netflix Premium, 4 screens. A charge of $15 for Spotify Family. A charge of $130 for Amazon Prime Annual. I leaned back in my chair. The total at the bottom of the spreadsheet was a number that made my stomach turn. It was enough to buy a small island. It was enough to retire on. And I had poured it into a black hole. But the biggest item was not on this spreadsheet. It was a deed. I opened a separate folder on my drive. I pulled up the property records for Unit 4B at the Kensington Lofts. It was a two-bedroom apartment in a gentrifying neighborhood. I had bought it 5 years ago as an investment property. The market value had since appreciated by 40% for the last 4 years. Caleb, his wife, and Toby had lived there. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary. "Just until I get back on my feet," Caleb had said. 6 months, max. 6 months had turned into 48 months, rent collected, $0. Utilities paid by tenant, $0. HOA fees paid by owner, me, $600 a month. I looked at the lease agreement. It was a month-to-month courtesy lease I had drafted myself. More of a formality than a binding contract, but it did exist, and it had clauses. I took a sip of water. It was time to start cutting the cords. I started small. The digital intravenous lines. I logged into Netflix. I went to the account settings, sign out of all devices, change password, cancel subscription. I logged into Spotify, remove members from family plan, downgrade to individual. I logged into Amazon, remove authorized user, Caleb Hawkwell, remove authorized user, Martha Hawkwell, change password. It was petty, perhaps, but it was also symbolic. These were the comforts they took for granted, the background noise of their lives that they assumed was free. They were about to learn that silence has a price. Next came the utilities. I pulled up the ComEd account for my parents' house. The bill was in my name. It always had been. Since the time my father forgot to pay it for 3 months, and they almost got cut off in the dead of winter. I clicked Stop Service. Effective date, tomorrow. I pulled up the internet provider. Cancel service. Reason for cancellation. Moving out. Then, the credit cards. I called the Platinum support line for my bank. The concierge answered on the first ring. "Good evening, Ms. Hawkwell. How can I assist you?" "I need to remove 2 authorized users from my account immediately," I said. "Martha Hawkwell and Richard Hawkwell." "Certainly. I can process that now. Their physical cards will be declined the next time they attempt a transaction. Would you like me to send them a notification?" "No," I said. "Let them find out at the register." "Done. Is there anything else?" "Yes. Mark the cards as lost or stolen just to be safe. I want new numbers issued for my primary card." "Very wise. I will overnight the new metal card to your address on file." "Send it to the Langham, Suite 3004. "Understood." I hung up. I sat there for a moment, listening to the silence. I felt lighter, physically lighter. The invisible tether that had connected my wallet to their whims had been severed. Then, my phone started to buzz. I looked at the screen. It was Caleb. I ignored it. It buzzed again. A text message. "Caleb. Yo. WTF? The Netflix just cut out right in the middle of the game. Did you change the password?" 2 minutes later, Caleb. "Seriously, Lace? The internet is down too. Mom is freaking out. Did you forget to pay the bill?" 5 minutes later, Caleb. "Pick up the phone. I know you are seeing this. The Wi-Fi is dead. I can't stream the game. Toby is crying because his cartoons won't load." I watched the messages roll in. The entitlement was breathtaking. He wasn't asking if I was okay. He wasn't apologizing for the night before. He was mad because his free entertainment had been interrupted. I didn't reply. Not yet. I opened a new document. I typed the header. Notice to vacate. I drafted a formal letter to my attorney. A man named Sterling who specialized in real estate disputes. Subject: Eviction proceedings for Unit 4B, Mr. Sterling. Please initiate immediate eviction proceedings for the occupants of my property at 1402 West Kensington Avenue, Unit 4B. There is no formal rental agreement in place for the current term, but the occupants are technically month-to-month tenants at will. I want to serve them with a 30-day notice to vacate, effective immediately. If they resist, I want to pursue full legal action for back rent based on market value for the last 48 months. Additionally, please investigate if there are any lease violations. I have reason to believe the tenant may be subletting a room against HOA regulations. Regards, Lacey Hawkwell. I hit send. The phone was still buzzing. My mother was calling now, then my father, I picked up the phone. I didn't answer the call. Instead, I opened my email app. I composed a new message to Caleb. Subject. No subject. To Caleb. Hawkwell@gmail.com. Caleb, I am not your tech support. I am not your banker, and I am no longer your landlord. Enjoy the darkness. It is free. Lacey, I sent it. Then, I did the final thing. I went into my phone's settings. I selected block contact for Caleb, then for Mom, then for Dad. I placed the phone face down on the desk. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. The city lights were dazzling. Down there, millions of people were paying their own bills, fighting their own battles, living their own lives, for the first time in 15 years. I was one of them. I looked at the spreadsheet one last time before closing the laptop. The final sum of money I had saved by cutting them off for just 1 year was $42,000. $42,000. That wasn't just money. That was a down payment on a dream I hadn't even let myself have yet. That was trips to Europe. That was investing in startups. That was my future, which I had been feeding to them in bite-sized chunks. I closed the laptop. The screen went black. But this time, unlike the workstation covered in orange juice, this black screen signaled a beginning, not an end. The audit was complete. The deficit had been identified, and the assets were finally, truly, mine. Tuesday morning broke over Chicago with a gray, oppressive humidity. But inside the Hawkwell ecosystem, the weather was the least of their problems. I was not there to witness the initial fallout, but thanks to the digital breadcrumbs and the frantic voicemails that filtered into my blocked folder, I could reconstruct the events with near-perfect clarity. It was a comedy of errors, a symphony of entitlement crashing headfirst into the wall of solvency. The first domino fell at 10 in the morning at Whole Foods. My mother, Martha Hawkwell, was a creature of habit. Every Tuesday, she went to the upscale grocery store to buy organic produce, artisan cheeses, and grass-fed beef that she would inevitably overcook. She pushed her cart through the aisles, filling it with items that cost more than most people's daily wage: truffle oil, Manuka honey, imported olives. She did not look at prices. She never had to. The card in her purse, the sleek, heavy Visa signature card with my name on the account and hers as an authorized user, was a magic wand. She waved it, and the goods became hers. She arrived at the checkout counter with a cart overflowing with $300 worth of groceries. She chatted with the cashier, a young woman she likely ignored on days when she wasn't feeling benevolent. The cashier rang everything up. The total flashed on the screen: $342.15. My mother retrieved the card. She swiped it with the casual elegance of a queen knighting a subject. Beep, the terminal flashed a red light. "Oh, the chip must be dirty," my mother surely said, forcing a laugh. "Try it again, dear." The cashier tried it again, and again. Finally, the manager came over. He looked at the screen. The message was not network error. It was do not honor, stolen/lost. "Ma'am," the manager said, his voice dropping to that discreet whisper used to avoid embarrassing customers, though everyone in the line could hear. "This card has been flagged as stolen. I have to confiscate it." "Confiscate it?" My mother's voice would have risen an octave. "That is my daughter's card. I have been using it for 10 years. There is a mistake. Call the bank." "I cannot call the bank, ma'am. The system is automatic. Do you have another form of payment?" She did not. Her personal debit card, attached to the joint account she shared with my father, had a balance that hovered consistently around $12. She had to leave. She had to walk away from the cart full of food while the people in line behind her, neighbors, church members, people she tried so hard to impress, watched in silence. The shame must have been scorching. It was the first time in a decade she had heard the word no from a machine. Across town, the second domino was falling. My father, Richard, drove a massive Ford Expedition. It was a tank of a vehicle that got 12 miles to the gallon on a good day. He loved it because it made him feel powerful. He pulled into the Shell station. the low fuel light glowing a warning orange. He inserted the fleet card I provided for family emergencies, which he interpreted as driving to the hardware store to buy tools he would never use. He squeezed the handle. Nothing happened. The pump screen read, "Authorization declined." He tried again. He slammed the pump handle back into the cradle. He marched inside to yell at the attendant, a teenage boy who barely spoke English. My father was a man who believed that volume could solve technical difficulties. He shouted about loyalty and faulty equipment, but the computer did not care about his volume. The card was dead. He had to drive home on fumes, sweating, watching the needle dip below the empty line, terrified he would be stranded on the side of the road like a common pauper. Then there was Caleb. Caleb did not leave the house on Tuesdays. Tuesdays were for his market research, which was his euphemism for online sports betting and playing ranked matches in Call of Duty. He was in the middle of a high-stakes match. He had money on this, likely borrowed money. Suddenly, the world went dark. The latency bar on his screen spiked to red, then vanished. The connection was lost. He checked the router. The lights were dead. He checked his phone. No Wi-Fi. He switched to data, only to realize I had throttled the family plan data limit to 0 gigabytes before canceling it entirely. The house, usually a hub of digital noise, was plunged into a terrifying analog silence. By noon, the Hawkwell clan had converged in the living room. The mood was not one of introspection. It was not a somber meeting where they realized they had pushed me too far. No, it was a war council. They were the victims. I was the villain. "She is doing this on purpose," Caleb raged, pacing the room. "She is trying to humiliate us. I had a potential payout of $500 on that game. She owes me that money." "I had to leave the groceries. Richard," my mother sobbed, clutching a tissue. "Mrs. Gable from the garden club was right behind me. She saw everything. I could die. I could just die of shame. Lacey is sick. She is having a mental breakdown." "She is being a brat," my father declared, slamming his hand on the armrest of his recliner. "She thinks because she makes the money, she makes the rules. I changed her diapers. I put a roof over her head for 18 years. This is disrespect, pure and simple. We need to remind her who her family is." "We should go down there," Caleb said, his eyes lighting up with a malicious idea. We go to Stratum. We make a scene. We tell her boss that she is abandoning her elderly parents and her struggling brother. She cares about her image more than anything. If we embarrass her in front of those suits, she will fold. She will turn the cards back on just to shut us up. "You are right," my father agreed. Standing up, "She needs a lesson in hierarchy. Get in the car." They piled into the Ford Expedition, praying the remaining fumes would get them to the city center. I was sitting in my new office on the 40th floor of the Stratum Systems Tower. The glass walls offered a panoramic view of the skyline. I was sipping an espresso that had been brought to me by an assistant. The coffee cost $6. I paid for it with my own money, and it tasted like victory. My monitor had a small window open in the corner. It was connected to the building's security feed. I had asked the head of security, a former Marine named Marcus, who owed me a favor for fixing his home network, to alert me if any unauthorized visitors matching my last name appeared. At 2 p.m, the alert chimed. I maximized the window. There they were. The camera feed was crisp, high definition. I saw my father, wearing his good windbreaker, which was 2 sizes too small. I saw my mother, wearing sunglasses indoors to hide her puffy eyes. I saw Caleb, looking disheveled in a hoodie, holding Toby by the hand. They were using the child as a prop, a human shield of sympathy. They marched toward the security turnstiles with the confidence of people who have never been denied entry. My father approached the main desk. I could not hear the audio, but I could read the body language perfectly. He was doing his important man routine. He puffed out his chest. He pointed a finger at the guard. He gestured toward the elevators. The guard, a large man with a stoic expression, did not flinch. He looked down at his screen. He typed something. Then he looked up and shook his head. My father slammed his hand on the desk. The guard stood up. He was a head taller than my father. My mother stepped in, pulling down her sunglasses. She was doing the distraught mother routine. She pointed at Caleb. She pointed at Toby. She was likely saying something about an emergency, about how her daughter would want to see them immediately. The guard did not budge. He pointed toward the revolving doors. Caleb started shouting. He tried to push past the turnstile. That was a mistake. 2 more guards materialized from the side alcoves. They stepped in front of Caleb. One of them placed a hand on his shoulder, not aggressively, but with enough weight to make it clear that resistance was futile. The lobby was filled with people, tech professionals, investors, clients. They stopped to watch. The spectacle of the Hawkwell family meltdown was being broadcast live to the very people they wanted to impress. But the narrative was not going their way. They did not look like victims. They looked like lunatics. I took a sip of my coffee. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not sadness. It was not anger. It was a profound, weightless relief. It was the feeling of watching a storm rage on a television screen while sitting in a warm, dry room. They could not touch me. The glass was too thick. The elevator codes were too complex. The list was too absolute. My father was red in the face. He was shouting now, pointing up at the ceiling, presumably at me. But I was 40 floors up. I was a god in this building, and he was just a noisy ant. Finally, the guards escorted them out. They did not drag them, but they guided them firmly, creating a wall of uniformed authority that pushed them back through the revolving doors and onto the rainy sidewalk. They stood there for a moment, looking up at the tower. Then, defeated, they walked back toward the parking garage. I closed the window. "Ms. Hawkwell?" I turned. My assistant, a young woman named Sarah, was standing in my doorway. She looked uncomfortable. She held a thick manila envelope in her hand. "A process server just dropped this off at the front desk," she said. "He said it was urgent. Since you are in a meeting, security scanned it and brought it up." "Thank you, Sarah." I took the envelope. I waited until she left before opening it. It was a legal summons. I scanned the document. My eyes widened, not in fear, but in disbelief at the sheer audacity. Plaintiff: Richard and Martha Hawkwell. Defendant: Lacey Hawkwell. Nature of suit: failure of filial responsibility / elderly abandonment / intentional infliction of emotional distress. They were suing me. My father, the man who had forged my signature on loans, was using a dusty, archaic statute to sue me for support. The document claimed that they were destitute and reliant, and that I, as the sole provider, had maliciously severed their lifeline, causing irreparable harm and mental anguish. They wanted alimony, parental alimony. I laughed. A short, sharp sound that surprised me. It was the stupidest thing they could have possibly done. If they had just come to talk, if they had apologized, if they had shown 1 ounce of humility, I might have eventually softened. I might have paid for the groceries. I might have turned the internet back on for Toby. But a lawsuit? A lawsuit meant discovery. A lawsuit meant that I could legally subpoena their financial records. I could expose the gambling debts. I could expose the fraudulent loans. I could expose the years of financial abuse in a court of public record. They had brought a knife to a nuclear war. I picked up my phone. I dialed my lawyer. Sterling. "Lacey," he answered. "I got your email about the eviction. We are drafting the notice now." "Add another item to your list," I said, my voice cold and sharp as a diamond cutter. "I just got served. My parents are suing me for support." There was a pause on the line. Then, Sterling let out a low whistle. "You are joking. Do they know what discovery involves? Do they know we can audit every dime they have spent for the last 20 years to prove they aren't destitute? Just irresponsible?" "They don't know," I said, looking out at the gray sky. "But they are about to learn. I want you to counter-sue." "Sterling." "On what grounds?" "Everything," I said. "Fraud, embezzlement, identity theft regarding the loans Dad took out in my name, and I want full forensic accounting of every cent I gave them. If they want to make this legal, let's look at the ledger. This will destroy them. Lacey, Sterling warned. "This goes from a family dispute to criminal charges for your father." I looked at the empty spot on my desk where a picture of my family used to sit. "They fired the first shot." "Sterling," I said, "I am just finishing the war. File it." I hung up. Down on the street, the Ford Expedition was probably running out of gas. Up here, the air was clear. The shock of reality had hit them, but they hadn't learned from it. They had chosen to escalate. So be it. I turned back to my computer. I had a department to run, and unlike my family, I had work to do. The lawsuit my parents filed was a tactical error of such magnitude that it almost made me pity their incompetence. They had fired a legal warning shot at a woman who commanded an army of lawyers. They wanted a war of attrition, thinking I would settle to avoid the embarrassment of a public court battle. They failed to realize that when you sue someone for support based on their wealth, you invite that person to scrutinize exactly why you are poor. My attorney, Sterling, sat across from me in his mahogany-paneled office 2 days after the summons arrived. He slid a tablet across the desk. His expression was a mix of professional impressiveness and personal disbelief. "We were preparing the standard 30-day notice to vacate for your brother," Sterling said, tapping the screen. "In Chicago, without a written lease, a tenant at will is entitled to 1 full rental period of notice. We were going to be generous and give him until the end of the month." I looked at the screen. It was a listing on a popular short-term rental site. The photos were grainy, but the location was unmistakable. It was the second bedroom of my apartment at Kensington Lofts. The title read, "Urban Oasis, Chill Vibes Near Downtown." "He is subletting," I said, my voice flat. "He is running an illegal hotel," Sterling corrected. "He has hosted 12 guests in the last 3 months. The reviews mention that the host, a user named Sea Dog, is friendly, but the apartment smells like pot." This is a direct violation of the Homeowners Association bylaws, which strictly prohibit short-term rentals. It is also a violation of city ordinance since he does not have a license. I smiled. It was a cold, razor-thin smile. Caleb had not just bitten the hand that fed him, he had tried to sell tickets to the feeding. "Does this change the timeline?" I asked. "Drastically," Sterling said, leaning back. "This constitutes an immediate and incurable breach of the property usage. We do not have to give him 30 days. We can file for an emergency nuisance eviction in the state of Illinois. If a tenant is conducting illegal business on the premises that puts the owner's liability at risk, we can remove them in 72 hours. Do it," I said. "And Sterling, I want the sheriff there. I want a civil standby." 3 days later, at 7 in the morning, the sky was a bruised purple color, threatening snow. I stood in the hallway of the 4th floor of the Kensington Lofts. Beside me stood 2 uniformed Cook County Sheriff's deputies, their hands resting casually on their belts. Behind us was a crew of 4 professional movers from a company called Clean Slate Relocation. I had not slept well. But I felt electric. This was not vengeance. This was asset recovery. I nodded to the lead deputy. He stepped forward and pounded on the door. The sound echoed through the hallway, heavy and authoritative. "Sheriff's Department, open up." There was silence for a long moment. Then, the shuffling of feet, the peephole darkened. "Who is it?" Caleb's voice was thick with sleep and irritation. "Sheriff's Department," the deputy repeated, louder this time. "Open the door, Mr. Hawkwell, or we will breach it." The lock clicked. The door swung open. Caleb stood there in a pair of stained gray sweatpants and no shirt. His hair was a bird's nest of confusion. He blinked at the deputies. Then his eyes slid to me. The color drained from his face instantly. "Lacey?" he stammered. "What is this? It is 7 in the morning." "We are executing an order of possession," the deputy said, handing Caleb a stack of paperwork. "You were served notice regarding the illegal commercial use of the property 3 days ago via certified mail. You did not respond. You have 10 minutes to gather your personal essentials. The locks are being changed today." "What?" Caleb laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. "You can't do that. I live here. I have rights. Lacey, tell them. Stop this joke. I stepped past the deputy into the entryway. The smell hit me first. It was a mixture of stale pizza, marijuana smoke, and damp laundry. The apartment, my investment, my property, looked like a fraternity house after a particularly rough weekend. There were scuff marks on the walls. A sticky residue coated the hardwood floor. You had rights, Caleb, I said, my voice cutting through the stale air. You had the right to live here rent-free. You had the right to a safe home for your son. You forfeited those rights when you decided to turn my property into an illegal hostel and expose me to liability lawsuits from the building association. It was just a few times, Caleb shouted, stepping back as the movers began to file in. I needed cash. You cut me off. Remember? I had to do something. So you sold access to my house? I looked at the movers. Start with the living room. Just then, a door slammed open down the hall. Caleb's wife, Sheila, stumbled out. She was wearing a silk robe that I knew cost $200 because I had bought it for her birthday last year. Her eyes were wide with panic. What is happening? She shrieked. Who are these people? Caleb, why are they taking the TV? Two large movers had already lifted the 75-inch flat-screen television from its wall mount. They moved with the efficiency of ants dismantling a beetle. That is our TV, Sheila yelled, rushing toward them. Put it down. That belongs to us. I stepped in her path. I pulled a thick binder from my bag. I opened it to a tab marked Assets. Actually, Sheila, I said, holding up a receipt. Samsung QLED, 75-inch, purchased November 14th, 2023, card ending in 4098, cardholder, Lacey Hawkwell. That is my television. She stopped, her mouth hanging open. But you gave it to us. I let you use it, I corrected. Just like I let you use this apartment. But the loan period has expired. I pointed to the leather sectional sofa that the other two movers were currently wrapping in plastic. Restoration hardware, $3,000. Receipt here. Take it. I pointed to the espresso machine on the counter, crusted with old coffee grounds. Breville Barista Express, $700. Receipt here. Take it. You are stealing our stuff, Caleb roared, trying to push past a deputy to get to the TV. The deputy caught him by the chest. Sir, step back. If you interfere with the removal of the property owner's assets, I will arrest you for disorderly conduct. Stand against the wall. Caleb froze. He looked at the gun on the deputy's hip. He looked at me. The aggression in his eyes flickered and died, replaced by a terrified realization that he was physically and legally outmatched. Toby is sleeping, Sheila cried, playing the card I knew was coming. You are going to wake him up. How can you do this to a child? I am not doing anything to Toby, I said calmly. You had 3 days to pack. You chose to ignore the legal notice because you thought I was bluffing. You gambled with your son's stability, and you lost. Now, go wake him up gently and pack his clothes. You have strictly personal items only. Clothes, toiletries, toys, no furniture, no electronics that you did not pay for. The next hour was a blur of motion. The apartment was stripped. The dining table I had bought for Thanksgiving dinners was disassembled. The expensive rugs were rolled up. The artwork, prints I had selected from a gallery in River North, was taken down, leaving ghost-like rectangles on the dirty white walls. The space, once a cozy, high-end loft, was reduced to its skeleton. It looked small and sad without the veneer of my money covering its flaws. Caleb and Sheila stood in the center of the living room, surrounded by 6 black garbage bags filled with their clothes. Toby sat on top of a suitcase, clutching a stuffed dinosaur, looking confused but strangely quiet. He had likely grown used to chaos in this household. Caleb looked at the empty wall where the TV used to be. He looked at the floor where the rug had been. He looked at me. Where are we supposed to go? He asked. His voice was no longer angry. It was small. Lacey, seriously, it is October. It is 40 degrees outside. You can't put us on the street. You are not on the street, I said. checking my watch. You have a car. I did not take the car, even though I paid for the down payment. Consider that a severance package. But where do we sleep? He pleaded. We have no cash. You froze the accounts. That sounds like a problem for the head of the household, I said. You are a man, Caleb. You are 38 years old. You have 2 hands and a driver's license. There are hiring signs in every window in this city. Go drive for Uber. Go stock shelves. Do what everyone else does. I can't get a job in a day, he spat. Then go to your safety net, I said, gesturing toward the door. Go to Mom and Dad. They are the ones who sued me to protect you. Surely they have room in their hearts for their favorite son. Caleb flinched. You know their house is small. There is no room for all of us. Then maybe they should not have spent their retirement savings on your gambling debts, I said. Caleb's eyes widened. How did you... I audited the accounts. Caleb, I said, stepping closer to him so Sheila wouldn't hear the full details, though she probably suspected. I know about the $20,000 Dad borrowed against the house equity last year. I know he gave it to you, and I know you lost it. He went pale. Speaking of the house, I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper that was colder than the wind outside. You might want to hurry, if they are counting on that equity to house you. They are in for a surprise. I did a title search yesterday. Dad is 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank is circling. If you go there, you might just be moving from one foreclosure to another. Caleb looked like he had been punched in the gut. He staggered back slightly. Get out, I said, stepping back to my normal volume. The movers took the last box. The deputies ushered them toward the door. Sheila was sobbing now, dragging a suitcase with a broken wheel. Caleb picked up 2 garbage bags, his knuckles white. He looked at me one last time, expecting. Perhaps a last-minute reprieve, a check, a $20 bill, anything. I gave him nothing but a stare. He walked out. I stood alone in the empty apartment. The silence was absolute. I walked to the door where the locksmith was waiting. Change it, I said. High-security deadbolt, and put a keypad on it. I want the code to be something random. You got it, ma'am, the locksmith said, drilling into the metal. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. I saw them exit the building. They looked small from 4 stories up. They loaded the bags into Caleb's dirty sedan. It looked like a clown car, stuffed to the brim with the refuse of a wasted life. They sat there for a long time. I could see Caleb hitting the steering wheel. I could see Sheila wiping her face. Then, finally, the car pulled away, merging into the morning traffic. Just another anonymous vehicle in a city of 3 million people. I turned back to the room. It was empty. It was dirty. It needed a deep clean and a fresh coat of paint. But it was mine. I took a deep breath. The air still smelled faintly of them, but the draft from the open door was blowing it away, replacing it with the crisp, cold scent of the approaching winter. All done, the locksmith said, handing me a new set of keys. That will be $250. I handed him my card. The transaction went through instantly. Approved. I locked the door behind me. The bolt slid home with a solid, mechanical thud. It was the sound of a chapter closing. It was the sound of a leak being plugged. I walked down the hallway, my heels clicking on the floor, and for the first time in years, I did not feel the weight of my brother on my shoulders. I felt only the weight of the keys in my pocket, and they were light as a feather. The collapse of the Hawkwell household happened with the predictable physics of a dam bursting. When you force 3 adults, a high-maintenance child, and a lifetime of resentment into a 1,200-square-foot bungalow that was already teetering on the edge of foreclosure. The pressure builds fast. I heard about the chaos through the grapevine of neighborhood gossip, but I did not need a spy to visualize it. Caleb and Sheila had moved into my old room, cramming their lives into a space meant for a teenager. My father, stripped of his illusion of control, was likely pacing the living room, barking orders that no one followed, and my mother, the emotional shock absorber of the family, finally reached her limit. It was Thursday evening when my phone rang. I had unblocked my father's number for the sole purpose of my lawyer's instructions regarding the lawsuit, but I did not expect a voice call. I expected a settlement offer or a threat. Instead, I heard breathing, heavy, ragged breathing. "Lacey," my father's voice cracked. It was a sound I had never heard before. Richard Hawkwell did not crack. He roared. He lectured. But he did not sound like a frightened child. "It is your mother. She is in the ICU. Her heart." I felt a phantom twinge in my chest. A reflex of biology, but I suppressed it instantly. "Which hospital?" I asked, my pen hovering over my notepad. "St. Mary's," he wheezed. "Please, just come. She keeps asking for you." I hung up. I did not rush. I did not run red lights. I finished my tea. I changed from my loungewear into a sharp, charcoal gray suit, armor. If I was going into the lion's den, I would not go as a daughter. I would go as an executioner. St. Mary's was a depressing brutalist structure on the edge of the suburbs. The air inside smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. I walked past the gift shop where families were buying get-well-soon balloons for people who would never get well. I took the elevator to the 4th floor, room 402. I paused at the door. Through the small glass window, I saw the tableau. My mother was hooked up to a monitor, her face pale and waxy against the pillows. My father sat in a plastic chair, his head in his hands. Caleb was leaning against the windowsill, looking bored and annoyed, tapping on his phone. Sheila was nowhere to be seen, likely hiding in the cafeteria. I pushed the door open. The sound of the heart monitor was a rhythmic, high-pitched beep that cut through the silence. My father looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. For a second, I saw hope in them. He thought the checkbook had arrived. "Lacey," he breathed, standing up. "Thank God. The doctors say it is stress-induced cardiomyopathy, broken heart syndrome. Can you believe that? Her heart is literally breaking because of this family." He looked at me, waiting for me to rush to the bedside, to weep, to apologize. I stayed by the door. "I spoke to the nurse at the station," I said, my voice level. "She is stable. They are keeping her for observation, but she is not in immediate danger." "Not in danger?" Caleb scoffed from the window. He shoved his phone into his pocket. "She is lying there because of you. You throw us out on the street. You cut off the money. You serve us with eviction papers. What did you think was going to happen? You almost killed her." "I did not clog her arteries, Caleb," I said. "And I did not force you to run an illegal hotel in my apartment. You created your own stress. I just stopped subsidizing it." My mother stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. She looked at me, and her face twisted into a mask of weak, tragic martyrdom. "Lacey," she whispered, reaching out a hand that trembled theatrically. "My baby, why are you doing this? We are your blood. Look at your father. He is an old man. We have nothing. How can you sleep at night in that ivory tower knowing we are suffering?" "I sleep very well, Mother," I said, "because I paid for the bed." "Don't you start with the money again," my father snapped, his sorrow instantly replaced by the defensive anger that was his default setting. "Is that all we are to you? A balance sheet? This is your mother. She needs peace. She needs security. The hospital bill alone is going to be thousands of dollars. We don't have insurance because the premium on the policy you paid for lapsed when you canceled the card." "That sounds like poor planning on your part," I said. "Poor planning?" My father took a step toward me, his finger raised. "I am your father. I demand some respect. You are going to go down to billing right now. You are going to put your card on file, and you are going to drop this ridiculous lawsuit. And then you are going to apologize to your brother and help him find a place to live. We are done playing these games." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had terrified me as a child, the man whose approval I had chased for 3 decades, and I realized he was not a giant. He was just a small, desperate grifter. "I am not here to pay the bill, Richard," I said, dropping the dad entirely. And I am certainly not here to apologize. I opened my briefcase. I pulled out a thick blue folder. I am here to talk about Hawkwell Logistics. The room went dead silent. The beeping of the monitor seemed to get louder. My father froze. His hand, still raised in the air, began to shake. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like gravity had pulled it straight into the floor. "I don't know what you are talking about," he stammered, backing away. "I think you do," I said, stepping forward. I placed the folder on the rolling tray table at the foot of my mother's bed. During my audit, I found something interesting. A loan, a business expansion loan from Distinct Capital, taken out 3 years ago. Principal amount, $250,000. Caleb whistled low. "Damn, Dad. You got $250,000? Where is it?" "Shut up. Caleb," my father hissed. "The loan was approved based on a stellar credit history," I continued. My eyes locked on my father's. "It was secured against a guarantor. Me. My name is on the paperwork. Richard, my social security number, my employment history at Stratum Systems, and at the bottom, there is a signature." I opened the folder to the flagged page. I pointed to the signature line. It was a scrawl that looked vaguely like mine, but I knew the loop on the L was wrong. "I did not sign this," I said. "It was a misunderstanding," my father choked out. Sweat was beading on his forehead. "I needed capital. The trucks were breaking down. I was going to pay it back. I just needed your credit score to get the prime rate. I was helping the family business. It was for us." "It was fraud," I said. "It was identity theft. It was a felony. You forged my signature to secure $250,000, and then you proceeded to lose it all. The business is bankrupt. The loan is in default. The bank contacted me yesterday because they are preparing to garnish my wages." "Please," my mother moaned from the bed. "Lacey, don't say that. Your father did what he had to do. He committed a crime. Mother," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "And he dragged me into it without my consent. Do you know what happens when you default on a fraudulent loan of this size? The bank doesn't just ask for the money back. They call the federal authorities." My father collapsed into the chair. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. "You told them?" "I told them I did not sign it," I said. "I filed an affidavit of forgery this morning. The fraud department at the bank is opening an investigation. They will trace the IP address where the application was submitted. They will trace the bank account where the funds were deposited. It leads right to your home office. Richard, they will put me in jail," he whispered. The reality of it was finally sinking in. He wasn't the patriarch anymore. He was a criminal facing 5 to 10 years in a federal penitentiary. "Yes," I said. "They will." Caleb pushed himself off the windowsill. "Whoa, hold on. If Dad goes to jail, the house gets seized, right? The bank takes everything?" "Everything," I confirmed. "You will all be homeless, and Dad will be in a cell." "Lacey, you can't!" my mother shrieked, the monitor spiking her heart rate. "He is your father. You have to stop it. Tell them it was you. Tell them you signed it. You have the money. You can pay it off." "Why would I do that?" I asked. "Why would I take on $250,000 of debt and ruin my own credit for a man who just sued me?" "Because we are family," she wailed. "No," I said. "We are not." I reached into the folder again. I pulled out a separate document. It was stapled and flagged with sticky notes. "I can stop the investigation," I said. The room went quiet again. My father looked up, hope desperate and pathetic in his eyes. "I can tell the bank that I remembered signing it. I can assume the debt. I can pay it off. I can keep you out of prison." "Richard, do it," Caleb urged. "Do it, Lacey. Come on." "There is a price," I said. I slid the document toward my father. "This is a severance agreement. It is a legal contract that I had my lawyers draft up this morning. It states that in exchange for my assumption of the Hawkwell Logistics debt, you, Richard, Martha, and Caleb agree to a permanent, irrevocable termination of all contact and relationship with me." I watched them read the title. It means, I clarified, that you legally disown me. It means you are forbidden from contacting me, coming near my home, or coming near my place of work. It means you drop the lawsuit immediately. It means that if you ever try to speak to me again or ask for another penny, I will consider it a breach of contract and I will reactivate the fraud charges. You are selling your daughter for freedom. This is cruel, my mother sobbed. You are asking us to pretend you are dead? I am asking you to make it official, I said. You have treated me like a bank account for years. Now, I am just closing the account. My father stared at the paper. His hands were shaking so hard the table rattled. I can't sign this. A father doesn't sign away his child. Then go to jail, I said coldly. The choice is yours. The police are already building the file. I can walk out of here, confirm the fraud, and you will be in handcuffs by dinner time. Dad, sign the paper, Caleb said. My father looked at Caleb. What? Sign the damn paper, Caleb shouted. If you go to jail, we lose the house. I have nowhere else to go. Sheila will leave me. I am not going to be homeless because you have too much pride to let Lacey go. She doesn't want us anyway. Let her go. My father looked at his son, the golden boy, the one he had spoiled, the one he had protected, and in that moment, he saw the monster he had created. Caleb didn't care about his father. He cared about the roof over his head. Caleb, my father whispered, hurt bleeding into his voice. Do it, Caleb yelled. Don't be selfish. I watched the realization break my father. He had sacrificed his daughter to save his son, and now his son was sacrificing him to save himself. It was poetic. It was tragic, and it was exactly what needed to happen. My father picked up the pen. He looked at me one last time. There was no anger left in his eyes, only a deep, hollow shame. I am sorry. Lacey, he whispered. No, you aren't, I said. You are just caught. He signed the paper. He handed the pen to my mother. She cried. She wailed. She looked at the ceiling, but she signed it. She chose her husband and her son over the daughter who had kept them alive. Then Caleb signed it. He did it quickly, without looking at me. I took the document. I checked the signatures. I placed it back in my folder. It is done, I said. I took the other document, the affidavit of fraud, and I tore it in half. I tore it again and again, until it was just confetti. I dropped the pieces in the trash can by the door. I will pay off the loan tomorrow, I said. The debt is mine. You are clear. The lawsuit is dropped effective immediately. I turned to the door. Lacey, my mother called out, her voice weak. Will we ever see you again? I stopped. I did not turn around. I looked at the reflection in the glass of the door. I saw a woman who was standing tall, unburdened, free. No, I said. Lacey Hawkwell, the daughter died in this room. You have the money. That is what you always wanted. I walked out of the room. I walked down the sterile hallway. I heard my mother start to scream, a high, keening sound of regret, but it sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, shutting out the sound, shutting out the smell, shutting out the past. I pressed the button for the lobby. As the elevator descended, I leaned my head back against the metal wall and exhaled. A single tear rolled down my cheek. It was not a tear of sadness. It was the last drop of poison leaving my system. I walked out into the cool night air. The stars were hidden behind the clouds, but I didn't mind. I didn't need the stars. I had my own light now, and for the first time in 34 years, I was the only one standing in it. The world of high-level corporate strategy is not a battlefield of swords or guns. It is a battlefield of leverage. For years, my father's company, Hawkwell Logistics, had survived not on efficiency, but on a form of nepotistic inertia. It was a small, disorganized fleet of 12 trucks that managed to secure contracts simply because they had been there for 20 years and because, unbeknownst to me, My father had been quietly leveraging my reputation in the tech sector to imply a level of sophistication his business did not possess. But leverage works both ways. When you lean too heavily on a support beam that you have personally sawed through, gravity takes over. 2 weeks after the hospital incident, I was sitting in my new corner office at Stratum Systems. My promotion to regional CTO had come with a significant increase in visibility. I was now overseeing the integration of Project Ether into the supply chains of our major partners. One of those partners was Meridian Distribution, a massive subsidiary of the energy conglomerate I had just dazzled with my presentation. Meridian was the whale that kept Hawkwell Logistics afloat. They provided nearly 60% of my father's revenue. My assistant buzzed me at 10 in the morning. "Lacey, I have a Jonathan Vance on line 1, she said. He is the VP of Operations at Meridian. He says it is regarding a vendor compliance issue. He mentioned your brother." I paused. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I pressed the button. "This is Hawkwell," I said, my voice cool and neutral. "Ms. Hawkwell, thank you for taking my call." Vance sounded harried, the tone of a man who had been dealing with incompetence all morning. "I apologize for disturbing you, but I have a situation here with one of our third-party logistics providers, a company called Hawkwell Logistics. The contact person, a Caleb Hawkwell, has been difficult." "In what way?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "Well, to be frank, they missed 3 delivery windows this week. When my team reached out to penalize them according to the contract, this Caleb character exploded. He started shouting about how he is your brother, how he has a direct line to the Stratum executive suite, and that if we touch his contract, you will pull the Ether integration from our grid." I closed my eyes for a brief second. It was so predictable. Caleb, stripped of his housing and his allowance, was trying to play the only card he thought he had left, my name. He was bluffing with an empty hand, assuming that I would quietly cover for him to avoid a scene. "He actually said that?" I asked. "He did," Vance confirmed. "And look, Lacey, we value our partnership with Stratum. I don't want to step on toes if this is a family business you are involved in, but the service levels are abysmal. We are losing money." The room was silent. I looked at the city skyline. I thought about the signature on the fraudulent loan. I thought about the eviction. I thought about the document they had signed in the hospital, disowning me. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice steady, devoid of any warmth. "I need you to listen to me very carefully." "I am listening." "I do not know anyone named Caleb Hawkwell." There was a pause on the other end, a confused silence. "I beg your pardon?" "He says he is your brother." "I have no brother," I lied, the words tasting like cold steel. "And I certainly have no affiliation with Hawkwell Logistics. If a vendor is using my name to threaten your operations, I would consider that a breach of professional ethics. Stratum Systems does not protect incompetence." "I see," Vance said, his voice changing. The confusion was gone, replaced by the sharp, predatory tone of a corporate operator who has just been given the green light to kill. "So, we should proceed according to standard protocol?" "Absolutely," I said. "If they are missing delivery windows, they are in breach of contract. You should terminate the agreement immediately. We cannot have inefficiencies in the supply chain. Ether requires precision." "Understood," Vance said. "Thank you for the clarification. Ms. Hawkwell, we will handle it." "Happy to help." I hung up. I did not feel a pang of guilt. I felt the satisfaction of a mathematician correcting an equation. Hawkwell Logistics had been shielded from the market forces for too long. I had just removed the shield. By noon, the email alerts confirmed the fallout. Meridian Distribution had issued a termination notice to Hawkwell Logistics effective immediately. 60% of my father's revenue evaporated in a single email. But I was not done. I knew the logistics market in Chicago. It was cutthroat. When a wounded animal stumbles, the predators circle. My father's company was now bleeding in the water. I made a phone call to Arthur Sterling. Arthur was the CEO of the Sterling Transport Group, no relation to my lawyer. Arthur was a titan in the local shipping industry. He had been trying to buy out my father's routes for a decade, but my father, in his stubborn pride, had always refused, calling Sterling a vulture. Arthur picked up on the second ring. "Lacey Hawkwell." His booming voice filled the receiver. "To what do I owe the pleasure? I heard you are the new queen of the energy grid." "I have a proposition for you, Arthur," I said. "I am always listening." "I am looking for a consulting gig," I said. "Something on the side. I have some proprietary optimization software that I think could increase your fleet's efficiency by 15%. I want to license it to you." 15% is a big number. "Lacey, what is the catch?" "The catch is that I want you to apply it specifically to the unspoken routes in the South Chicago corridor, the routes that are currently being serviced by smaller, less efficient legacy carriers." Arthur laughed. It was a knowing laugh. "You mean your father's routes?" "I mean the market's routes," I corrected. "There is a vacuum opening up. Meridian just cut their primary vendor. They are looking for a replacement who can handle the volume with modern tracking capabilities. If Sterling Transport walks in there tomorrow with my software and a bid that undercuts the previous vendor by 5%, you will take the whole territory." "You are handing me his business on a silver platter," Arthur said softly. "I am handing you a business opportunity," I said. "Do you want it or not? When can we meet?" "I will send over the software license agreement within the hour." By Wednesday, Sterling Transport had signed a provisional contract with Meridian. My father's trucks were sitting idle in their lot. The drivers, sensing the end, began to quit. Caleb, the vice president, was likely screaming into a phone that no one was answering. But there was one final loose end: the physical footprint. Hawkwell Logistics operated out of a warehouse and office complex in an industrial park near O'Hare Airport. They did not own the building, they leased it. My father had sold the building 10 years ago to free up cash for a bad investment, and he had been renting it back ever since. I did a title search on the property. The current owner was a commercial real estate holding company looking to liquidate some assets. The building was on the market. I called my personal banker. "I want to form a limited liability company," I said. "Name it Nemesis Holdings. Or no, let's be subtle. Call it Apex Property Management." "Done. What is the purpose of the entity?" "Real estate acquisition. I want to put in an all-cash offer for the commercial property at 409 Industrial Way. I want to close in 48 hours. No inspection. As is." "That is aggressive. Ms. Hawkwell, the asking price is $1.2 million. Offer them $1.1 million and tell them the money will be wired by close of business Friday." The deal went through with the speed that only cash can buy. By Friday afternoon, I was the legal owner of the building where my father sat, likely with his head in his hands, wondering why his business was collapsing. I sat in my office and drafted the letter. I did not use my own letterhead. I used the letterhead of Apex Property Management. To Hawkwell Logistics, Inc. Attention, Richard Hawkwell, CEO. Regarding Notice of Rent Adjustment. Dear tenant, please be advised that the property at 409 Industrial Way has changed ownership effective immediately. As the new management, we have conducted a market analysis of the area. Your current lease agreement is currently on a month-to-month basis, following the expiration of your previous term. We have found that your current rate of $4,000 per month is significantly below the current market value for industrial square footage in this zone. Effective 30 days from the date of this notice, the new monthly rent will be adjusted to $12,000 per month. This increase reflects the premium location and the rising property taxes in the district. If you are unable to meet this new rate, please consider this your 30-day notice to vacate the premises. Regards, Apex Property Management. I read it over. $12,000. It was a 300% increase. It was exorbitant. It was crushing. It was also technically legal. As commercial rent control laws in that district were non-existent for month-to-month tenants, I signed it with an illegible scrawl. I put it in the mail. I imagined the moment he would open it. He would be sitting at his desk, surrounded by cancellation notices from vendors, resignation letters from drivers, and the silence of phones that were no longer ringing. He would open this letter, thinking perhaps it was a bill he could juggle, and he would see the number, $12,000. He would not know it was me. He would think it was just the world, the cruel, unfeeling corporate world, finally closing its jaws around him. He would think it was bad luck. He would think it was the economy. He would never suspect that the landlord squeezing the life out of his company was the same girl who used to sit on his lap and ask for $1 to buy ice cream. I leaned back in my chair and spun it around to face the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the city. I had taken his biggest client. I had given his market share to his rival, and now I owned the ground beneath his feet. This was not a tantrum. This was not a screaming match in a hospital room. This was business, and business, as I had learned from the very best, is a zero-sum game. For me to win, someone else had to lose. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Arthur Sterling. Arthur, just signed the Meridian deal. Your software is a miracle. We are taking over the Hawkwell route starting Monday. Thanks for the tip. Lacey. I typed a reply. Lacey, just make sure the trucks run on time. Arthur, efficiency is everything. I hit send. I checked my bank account. The bonus from Stratum had cleared. The rent from the other properties I owned was pending. The numbers were climbing. I thought about Caleb, probably sitting in my parents' living room, explaining to my father why the Meridian contract was lost. I thought about my father, realizing he couldn't pay the rent. I felt a strange sense of peace. I had not just cut the cord, I had dismantled the entire power plant. They wanted to see what life was like without my support. They were about to find out that without me, they didn't just lose a safety net, they lost the floor. I packed up my bag. It was Friday night. I had a weekend to myself. No family dinners, no crises, no guilt. I walked out of the office, and for the first time, the click of my heels on the marble floor didn't sound like a march to war. It sounded like a victory lap. The collapse of the Hawkwell dynasty did not happen in slow motion. It happened with the terrifying velocity of a controlled demolition. Once the structural supports, my money, my influence, and my patience were removed, the entire edifice crumbled into dust in less than 45 days. It started with the business, Hawkwell Logistics, unable to pay the new market rate rent I had imposed through my shell company, and stripped of its primary revenue stream from Meridian. Folded like a house of cards. My father did not fight it. He could not. There was no capital left to hire a lawyer, and his credit was so radioactive from the loan fraud investigation that no bank would touch him. The bankruptcy court seized the assets. I watched from a distance as the 12 trucks, the pride of his life, were auctioned off for pennies on the dollar to pay creditors. Ironically, Arthur Sterling bought 5 of them to expand the very routes I had handed him. Then came the house, the bank, realizing that the business was dead and the income stream was gone, moved to foreclose on the bungalow. My parents had treated that house like a piggy bank, refinancing it every few years to pay for Caleb's mistakes or my father's delusions of grandeur. Now, the piggy bank was empty, and the bank wanted the ceramic shards. They were given 10 days to vacate. I heard through the grapevine that they moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that real estate agents politely described as transitional and everyone else described as dangerous. It was a walk-up on the 3rd floor of a building with peeling paint and bars on the windows. There was no dishwasher. There was no central air conditioning. There was just the smell of other people's cooking and the constant, low-level anxiety of poverty. But the true casualty was the marriage of Caleb and Sheila. Sheila was a woman who could tolerate a lot of things as long as there was a safety net. She could tolerate Caleb's laziness, his gambling, and his temper, provided there was a nice apartment to live in and a credit card to use at the mall. But when the apartment was gone, and the credit card was declined, and she found herself sharing a bathroom with her in-laws in a slum, her tolerance evaporated. The end came on a Tuesday night. Caleb, frustrated and impotent in his new reality, had started drinking heavily, cheap vodka, the kind that smells like rubbing alcohol. He started screaming at Sheila, blaming her for spending too much, blaming me for ruining his life, blaming everyone but the face in the mirror. Sheila didn't scream back. She just packed. She took Toby. That was the breaker. Caleb tried to stop her, blocking the door. But Sheila threatened to call the police. She told him that he was unfit, that he was unstable, and that she was taking their son to live with her parents in Wisconsin. "You are a loser, Caleb," she reportedly told him as she walked out the door with my nephew. "Lacey was right. You are just a child in a man's body." The door slammed. Toby was gone. That night, the silence in the cramped apartment must have been deafening. My parents, broken and tired, likely retreated to their bedroom to hide from the monster they had raised. Caleb was left alone with his vodka and his rage. At 2 a.m, Caleb got into his car. It was the only asset he had left, the sedan I had paid for, now battered and dirty. He was drunk. His blood alcohol level was later determined to be 3 times the legal limit. He did not drive to the new apartment. He drove to the Kensington Lofts. He drove to the building where he had lived rent-free for 4 years, in his drunken haze. Perhaps he thought he could just go back. Perhaps he thought if he banged on the door loud enough, I would be there to open it, to forgive him, to write a check and make the scary world go away. He parked the car on the sidewalk. He stumbled into the lobby. The night concierge was a new guy, someone who didn't know the Hawkwell history, but he knew trouble when he saw it. "I live here," Caleb screamed, slamming his fists against the glass security door. "Tell my sister to come down. Tell Lacey to come out here and face me." He picked up a heavy metal trash can from the curb and threw it at the glass. It bounced off, leaving a spiderweb crack. "Come out, you witch!" he roared. "You think you are better than me? You are nothing. You are just a wallet. Come out." The concierge hit the panic button. The police arrived in 4 minutes. Caleb resisted. Of course he did. He took a swing at a uniformed officer. It was a sloppy, drunken haymaker that missed by a foot. But the intent was enough. They tackled him. They tasered him. He was handcuffed, read his rights, and shoved into the back of a squad car, screaming my name the entire time. At the station, he used his one phone call to call my parents. They woke up to the nightmare. Their son was in jail. Assault on an officer, DUI, destruction of property. The bail was set at $25,000. They didn't have $25, let alone $25,000. Frantic, my father tried to call me. He dialed my number, the old number he had memorized, the number he had called 1,000 times to demand money. "We are sorry. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again." He tried again and again. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." He tried my work number. I had instructed the switchboard to auto-reject any calls from his area code. He sat on the floor of the police station, holding the phone, listening to the dial tone. It was the sound of a bridge that had been burned so thoroughly that not even the ashes remained. I was 4,000 miles away. I was in Paris. The Global Innovation Summit was being held at a historic hotel near the Champs-Élysées. The ballroom was a sea of crystal chandeliers, silk gowns, and the sharpest minds in the technology sector. I was wearing a black velvet evening gown that cost more than my father's truck. I held a flute of vintage champagne, the bubbles rising in a perfect golden line. The air smelled of expensive perfume and success. I had just finished a panel discussion on the ethics of autonomous energy systems. The applause had been thunderous. Now, I was networking. Men who controlled the GDP of small nations were handing me their business cards. I stepped out onto the balcony for a breath of fresh air. The Eiffel Tower was glittering in the distance, a beacon of iron and light. My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a Google alert. I had set a passive filter for my last name, just to keep an eye on the wreckage. Breaking news. Disturbance at Kensington Lofts leads to arrest. Caleb Hawkwell, 38, charged with DUI and assault on a police officer. I opened the article. There was a mugshot. Caleb looked terrible. His face was bloated. His eyes were bloodshot and wild. and there was a cut on his lip. He looked like a stranger. He looked like a man who had fallen off the edge of the world. I stared at the screen. I waited for the rush of triumph. I waited for the "I told you so" to bubble up in my chest. It didn't come. Instead, I felt a heavy, dull ache. It was pity. It was the kind of pity you feel when you see a dog that has been kicked too many times and has finally turned rabid. I didn't hate him anymore. Hate requires energy. Hate implies that the person still has power over you. I just felt sad. Sad that he was so weak. Sad that he had chosen to drown rather than learn to swim. I looked at the charges. Assault on a police officer was a felony. He was looking at real time. 3 to 5 years, easily. I thought about Toby. I thought about my 5-year-old nephew growing up with a father in prison. I thought about the stigma. I thought about the cycle of poverty and anger repeating itself, passing down the bloodline like a genetic defect. I took a sip of champagne. It tasted crisp and cold. I opened my banking app. I did not call my parents. I did not call a bail bondsman. I navigated to a legal aid fund that specialized in public defense support. I initiated a transfer, $5,000. I attached a memo to the donation, directed specifically to the public defender's office handling case number 49204, Hawkwell. Note: for legal counsel services, ensure a plea deal is reached for rehabilitation rather than maximum sentencing. Do not disclose the source. It was the bare minimum. It was enough to get him a lawyer who wouldn't sleep through the trial. It was enough to maybe, just maybe, get him into a diversion program instead of a cell block. I did it for Toby, and perhaps a small part of me did it for the little boy Caleb used to be, before the entitlement rotted him from the inside out. I closed the app. I locked the phone. "Lacey?" I turned around. Standing in the doorway of the balcony was Julian Thorne. Julian Thorne was a legend. He was the CEO of Nexus Dynamics, the largest artificial intelligence conglomerate in Europe. He was a man I had studied in college. He was 50 years old, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to dismantle everything they looked at. "Mr. Thorne," I said, extending my hand. "It is an honor. Please, call me Julian," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I saw your presentation. The ghost protocol logic you applied to the energy grid was brilliant. Ruthless, but brilliant. Efficiency often looks like ruthlessness to those who are used to waste," I said. He smiled. "Precisely. That is why I wanted to speak with you. Nexus is launching a new division focused on global infrastructure. We are looking for a global director of operations. The position is based in London, but it involves travel to Tokyo, New York, and Berlin." He leaned against the railing, looking out at the Paris lights. "We need someone who understands that systems are more important than sentiments, someone who can make the hard calls. I have heard rumors about your independence. They say you are a woman who owes nothing to anyone." "Rumors are often true," I said. "Good," Julian said, "because at this level, family can be a liability. We need people who are married to the mission." I looked at him. I looked at the city below. I thought about the mugshot on my phone. I thought about my father sitting in the dark. I thought about the family I had left behind in the mud. "I have no liabilities. Julian," I said. I cleared my ledger. "Then let's talk numbers," he said. "Start thinking in the 8-figure range." We stood there, discussing the future of artificial intelligence while the wind blew through the balcony. I realized then that I was not alone. I was surrounded by people who spoke my language, people who valued competence over blood, people who understood that respect is earned, not inherited. I had lost a brother, a mother, and a father, but as I looked at Julian and at the other innovators inside the ballroom, I realized I had found something else. I had found a tribe. Family. I decided as I clinked my glass against Julian's, is not about whose DNA you share. It is about who sees you. It is about who values you. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. The collapse was over. The dust had settled, and I was the only thing left standing. 2 years is a long time in the world of technology, but it is an eternity in the geography of the human heart. In the code I write, 2 years is 3 generations of software updates, a complete overhaul of architecture, and the obsolescence of the old systems. In my life, it was the time it took to build a skyscraper on the ashes of a bungalow. I sat in the back of a black limousine, watching the Chicago skyline approach. It was no longer a wall of gray hostility. It was a canvas I had painted. The car hummed with a quiet, electric vibration, moving seamlessly through the traffic my algorithms were currently managing. I was 36 years old. My suit was tailored in Milan. My hair was cut in a sharp, asymmetrical bob that screamed precision, and I was coming home. Not to the house with the peeling paint and the smell of potpourri. I was coming to the Ether Spire. The Spire was the crown jewel of my career with Nexus Dynamics. It was a 70-story marvel of sustainable engineering, a living building that breathed, regulated its own temperature, and managed its own waste, all powered by the core code I had saved from that orange juice-soaked wreck 2 years ago. Today was the grand opening. I was not just the architect, I was the guest of honor. The car slowed as we approached the plaza. Even through the tinted glass, I could see the flashbulbs. The press had gathered in a swarm. They called me the Ice Queen of Infrastructure, a nickname I wore like a badge of honor. They admired the coldness because it produced results. "We are 5 minutes out, Ms. Hawkwell," my driver said. "Thank you, James," I replied. I looked out the window. We were turning onto Michigan Avenue. The streets were wet with a fresh autumn rain, reflecting the city lights. I remembered driving these streets in my old sedan, crying, terrified, wondering if I had made a mistake by walking away. I touched the cold glass. The woman who drove that sedan was gone. She had been deleted to make space for the woman sitting here now. The car pulled up to the curb. The door opened. The noise hit me first. The shouting of reporters, the clicking of shutters, the applause of the crowd. I stepped out, my heels striking the pavement with authority. I waved, a practiced, polite gesture that promised nothing. I began to walk toward the entrance of the spire. The glass doors were massive, rising 30 feet high, reflecting the clouds. Then, I stopped. It was not a conscious decision. It was a reflex, drawn by a disruption in the pattern. My eyes, trained to spot anomalies in code, spotted an anomaly in the crowd. Across the street, standing in front of an older brick office building, was a security guard. He was wearing a uniform that was 2 sizes too big for him. The polyester fabric sagged at the shoulders. He was holding a cheap coffee cup, huddled against the cold wind, watching the spectacle of my arrival. He looked old. His hair, once a thick salt and pepper mane, was thin and entirely white. His posture, usually so puffed up with false bravado, was slumped, defeated by gravity and shame. It was my father, Richard Hawkwell. The world seemed to slow down. The noise of the photographers faded into a dull roar. He saw me. I watched recognition dawn on his face. It was a slow, painful process. He looked at the limousine. He looked at the reporters. He looked at the building that bore the name of the project he had once dismissed as a toy. And then he looked at me. In his eyes, I saw a hurricane of emotions. I saw shock. I saw pride. That twisted, selfish pride that wanted to claim credit for my success. But mostly, I saw regret. It was a deep, hollow hunger. He looked at my suit, my jewelry, the way the crowd parted for me, and he did the math. He calculated everything he had lost. He realized that the ATM he had smashed was actually a gold mine, and he had locked himself outside the gate. He took a step forward. He opened his mouth. I could see his lips form my name. Lacey. He looked ready to cross the street. He looked ready to run to me, to cause a scene, to beg, to play the proud father card in front of the cameras, hoping I would not embarrass him by rejecting him in public. He was banking on my shame. He was banking on the idea that I still cared what people thought. I stood there, frozen for a heartbeat. I had options. I could have signaled my security team to intercept him. I could have walked over there and handed him a check for $10,000, a crumb that would feed him for months but destroy his dignity. I could have screamed at him, unloaded 2 years of anger, and told him exactly how much he had hurt me. But then I realized something. Anger is a connection. Hate is a tether. If I screamed at him, I was acknowledging that he still had the power to upset me if I gave him money. I was acknowledging that I still felt responsible for him. To hate him was to keep him alive in my world. So I chose the nuclear option. I looked at him, I looked directly into his eyes, and then I let my gaze slide past him. I did not frown, I did not sneer. I simply unfocused my eyes, treating him like a lamppost, a fire hydrant, a crack in the sidewalk. I looked through him as if he were made of glass. I rendered him invisible. I saw him flinch. It was a physical reaction, as if I had slapped him. He froze, 1 foot off the curb. He waited for the glare, the anger, the recognition. He waited to be seen, but I did not see him. I turned my head back to the reporters. I smiled at a camera. I adjusted my scarf. "Ms. Hawkwell," a reporter shouted, "how does it feel to see your vision finally standing tall?" "It feels inevitable," I said, my voice clear and strong. I turned my back on the man across the street. I walked through the doors of the ether spire. I did not look back. I did not check to see if he was crying. I did not check to see if he was watching. He was no longer a variable in my equation. He was deleted data. The reception was a blur of champagne and congratulations. I shook hands. I signed contracts. I accepted an award made of heavy crystal. Through it all, I felt a lightness that was almost dizzying. The final thread had been cut. The ghost had tried to haunt me, and I had simply walked through it. That night, I returned to my penthouse. It was on the top floor of the spire, overlooking the lake. The view was endless black water meeting the night sky. I kicked off my heels. I poured a glass of water. I walked to my personal computer station, a desk made of reclaimed wood and tempered glass. I logged in. The desktop was clean, minimalist, organized. I opened the file directory. I navigated to a hidden subfolder deep within the archives. It was labeled Project Hawkwell, Litigation Recovery. Inside were the PDFs of the eviction notices, the forensic accounting spreadsheets, the police reports of Caleb's arrest, the signed severance agreement from the hospital, the photos of the text messages. It was a museum of pain. For 2 years, I had kept it. I told myself I kept it for legal protection, in case they ever tried to come back. But deep down, I knew I kept it because it was proof. It was proof that I was right. It was proof that I survived. But after tonight, after seeing the ghost across the street and realizing he couldn't touch me, I didn't need proof anymore. The tower I was standing in was the proof. I hovered the mouse over the folder, right-click, delete. Are you sure you want to permanently delete Project Hawkwell? This action cannot be undone. I stared at the prompt. A memory flashed. Toby laughing, my mother cooking, Caleb teaching me to ride a bike before the world broke him. I let the memory breathe for a second, acknowledging it, thanking it for the lesson, and then I let it go. "Goodbye," I whispered. I clicked yes. The folder vanished. The recycling bin emptied. The drive sector was overwritten. It was gone. No animosity, no nostalgia, just empty space ready for new data. I picked up my phone. I dialed a number. "Sarah?" I said. "Lacey? It is midnight," my assistant answered, sleepily. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is perfect," I said. "I want you to book the jet for Friday." "The Maldives." "The Maldives? A business trip?" "No," I said, smiling at the reflection in the window. "A vacation. Call Julian. Call Marcus. Call the whole development team. Tell them to pack for a week. No laptops. No phones. Just sun and expensive wine. I am treating everyone." "Wow," Sarah said, waking up fully. "That sounds amazing. Is this a special occasion?" "It is," I said. "We are celebrating the future." "Okay, I will get on it first thing. Good night, Lacey." "Good night, Sarah." I hung up. I walked out to the balcony. The wind was cold, but I was warm. I looked down at the city, at the millions of lights, knowing that somewhere down there, 3 people who used to share my last name were living their lives. I hoped they found peace. I hoped Caleb found a job. I hoped Toby grew up strong. But their hopes were no longer my burden to carry. I had built a fortress. I had defended it. And now, I was going to live in it. The city lights blurred as I looked up at the moon. The revenge was not the eviction. It was not the bankruptcy. It was this moment right here, the quiet, the peace, the absolute, unshakable knowledge that I was whole, all by myself. Voiceover. They say blood is thicker than water. It is the oldest lie we are told, designed to keep us bound to people who drain us dry. But I have learned the truth. When the water is clean, when it is pure and freely given, it is infinitely more precious than blood that has been poisoned by entitlement and greed. My billion-dollar project was never just about software or energy grids. It was about reprogramming my own life. I took a system that was crashing. I purged the corrupted files. And I wrote a new code. And standing here at the new dawn, looking at the horizon, I can finally say, the compilation is complete. No errors found. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a long journey from the broken computer to the top of the skyline, and I hope Lacey's strength resonated with you. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy city like Chicago? Or somewhere quiet and peaceful? Please leave a comment below to share your location and your thoughts on Lacey's final decision. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Blue Payback, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world. Stay strong.